Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Hi, Chris. It's great to have you here today. A lot of people will know who you are, but if people don't know who you are, could you introduce yourself and tell people a bit about you?
Absolutely. So my name is Chris Wild. I'm an author and campaigner for young people in care. I've written two books, one called Damage, which is a memoir of my life. So that's basically about being in care under 16. And then the second book is The State of It, which is more about semi-independent care. So that's young people going to semi-independent accommodation. But it also looks at the political side of the care system as well, so what happens backstage. And yeah, I'm an advocate for young people. I travel the country, speak at a lot of conferences, do a lot of training, keynote speaking. But my work is focused on trying to create a better system.
For the members of my network who were at the first conference, when you opened our first conference, and I think there wasn't really a dry eye in the room. You're such
Mm,
a powerful speaker in person,
mm.
and you explained your background and your story, and how you've come to be where you are now, and that obviously is an incredible moving, and that's the basis of your book, isn't it? That's what damaged a lot of the content of Damaged is around. So you come to this with that first-hand experience, don't you, of having been in the system and seen the good and the bad from the inside.
Yeah, I think that's what's kind of different and unique about my story is that I was in a care system and then I kind of had a massive void area where, I suffered with all kinds of traumas and addiction problems. But then I came back into the system at 30 years later as a professional after going to college and training, but just to see, but nothing had changed. And I think that's been like the catalyst, the premise of my work is trying to making those comparisons and seeing, but the system hasn't changed at all. The world has changed, but it stays stagnant. And that's where, I've been really motivated to kind of make those movements and make those changes around the system and look at how we can collaboratively make it a better place for all the vulnerable young people.
And for people maybe who are coming to this thinking, well, what is the issue with young people leaving care?
Yeah.
We call them care leavers, care experienced young people. There's lots of
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
terminology.
Yeah.
What is the issue? What are the kind of figures and the numbers? What's the impact that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think specifically for our conversation, Lisa. I mean, we've spoken about this previously. Is that one in three young people who leave care become homeless within 2 years, and there's many political reasons for that. I mean, one of the main reasons is people are not being able to be placed in the borough. There isn't enough properties, not kind of reasonable, suitable properties for young people. So when they leave the care system, they're given a choice, and they're normally placed in a hotspot area, in a deprived area, and given a flat surrounded by danger. And obviously, if you've been working hard for 2 years and trying to get your life back together, build a career for yourself, some kind of normality, and then you're placed back in the place you would try to escape, then of course you're going to be met with all kinds of complications. And a lot of young people will choose to be homeless because they don't want to be in that situation. So, a lot of my work is focused on making sure that these young people have a safe place to call home. If you think about the care system, if you think about young people, what's if we talk about foundations, and I get asked this all the time, if you could just change one thing, what's the most important thing about a young person leaving care who can build a life for themselves and thrive in a community? And that's a safe place to call home, a flat and property, somewhere where you can put your head down in the nighttime, somewhere where you can make some food, somewhere where you can start to, get pen and paper out and start to build a map of what it looks like. And that for me is the pinnacle, the most essential part of survival is somewhere you are safe.
It's so important, isn't it?
Mm,
It's the foundation of everyone's security, isn't it? Home,
yeah,
really. Having shelter, it's right up there when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It
yeah,
is really key. When we're talking about these young people, what kind of age are we? Because I think some people might have it in their mind what age groups we're talking about here. What age are you talking
yeah.
about,
I
Chris?
think also it's very important to understand, but there's policy and legislation out there, but it doesn't get used, and it doesn't get used because local authorities are inundated with young people coming to the system. So when we're talking about age, Lisa, it's 16 plus. Now again, you've got to understand when we say 16, that's a child. It's not an
Yeah,
adult, it's a child.
no.
And at
No.
16, you can be, depending on where you come from around the country, again, it's all about, geographical areas and postcode lottery. But let's say you're in a main city and there's no place to live whatsoever. You can be placed in a HMO, like a bedsit. But these are places, as we used to call them back in my day, hostels, where you might be in there with people who've just left prison for some heinous crimes, drug dealers, alcoholics, in some cases, pedophiles,
Mm.
and you're 16 years old, so vulnerable, and you're placed in these properties. So age 16, 18 upwards. But this is the thing about the system as well, is the language, it's the narrative around it. Is like if you're at home with your mom and dad at 16, your mom and dad will constantly refer to you as a child, you're a little child. But then in a system, you're referred to as an independent young adult. And I know, and I'm sure you do, Lisa, at 16, how your brain operates. There's
No,
not many people
absolutely.
who can go out there and succeed at 16.
No, I mean, I've got two teenagers, they're now
Yeah,
17
yeah,
and 19, and they still have a huge amount of support.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
beginning to wind their way in the world, but
yeah.
they're definitely not independent. No.
No, and I found it incredibly haunting when I used to manage semi-independent care homes, where I would be sent a referral, and it's like 15 years old, 16 years old. I'm thinking, why are you sending this young person to me, knowing but I've got some quite notorious gang boys in this property who are 18 plus, and what's going to happen is they're just going to groom this young person into their network, and a lot of local authorities will. I don't say it's not, but they don't care. But I think because it's become such a data analysis job, but the pressure is on them just to place them like a sales job. You've got 12 children to place in a week, just place them anywhere. So it's lost that safeguarding process, and they're just dumped in houses, and it just becomes, a free for all, a money making mechanism. And what we forget in this is the security and support of that young person. That's got to be the main focus, but it's lost. It's lost in transaction, and it's just and that's the whole thing about the care cliff. We call it the care cliff, where the system is becoming fractured because we don't have any kind of real strong legislation around that to prevent this from happening.
And yeah, and we've been, I feel like I've been talking about this for years. I know
Yeah.
you've been talking about it for a long time,
Mm.
and it feels like things are not changing fast enough. They're just not really changing at all. It feels like the
Yeah.
conversations I'm having, but there are some good bits. I know you're working on lots of amazing bits and pieces. So tell us a little bit about the things that you're working on to try and create some change in this space.
Yeah, I'm probably quite known for not being negative, but obviously, my line of work is I don't want those who are not heard to be ignored and forgotten, and that comes from a lot of young people who end up in jail or homeless. But the flip side to that, there's some amazing work, and I've got to champion the good work. I'm involved in a project at the moment in North Central London, so that's Haringey, Islington, Camden, Barnet, Enfield. And we're working with the NHS, who signed up to the Care Leavers Covenant, which is a national program to get young people from care in working opportunities within the NHS. Now, my role within this is not just to give people these opportunities, but to put kind of some support network around them. So it's to build these small communities. What's a small community? It's things which we will take for granted, like making sure that person's got clothing for work, they've got bus fare for work, they've got a care champion, an advocate, a mentor, whatever you want to call them. But in this program in particular, we're calling them care champions. So that care champion will be allocated to you throughout that process. So he'll be the one, might give you a call on Sunday. Hey, just checking in. Are you okay for tomorrow? You know where you're going? I can meet you halfway. Little things like that, which makes a huge difference. So that's a really important program. And I know that's been spread out nationally. I want to try and get about 25 young people by March in really good working opportunities within across North Central London. But also my work across the country independently. I do a lot of work with organizations. I'm working with an organization at the moment called Remarkable Outcomes. And we're looking at a new way of providing support for young people. So we don't just want a house or a property. We want staff who are trained within education, employment. So, you've got all the credentials in that one property. So you're offering not just a room, you're offering a proper package of service. And when I go and visit places like across the country, there's lots of great places doing great things. But when I walk into an organization like Remarkable Outcomes and I see, but they've got someone who used to be a housing officer working there, how important is that? So when that person leaves that property, they know how to then, to look at affordable accommodation. They've got someone there who used to be a school teacher. How important is that? They're not just people with no qualification who just sit behind a desk. These are people who are part of an education system. And I think that's what we've got to start looking at the care system as. It's not just a house. It's the whole thing, education, employment, and we've got to somehow build those bridges and bring everyone together. Because in the long run, we don't. If they fail, we failed.
And I would think, I can imagine lots of people listening to this
Mm,
assume that every service had that level of support, that
mm,
every child, teenager in the system
yeah,
would actually have access to someone who's got some education training, would have
yeah.
that housing background. That seems fairly foundational, really, doesn't it? But that's not the experience of most young people, is it?
No, it's not because what again we go back to what's happened. When the independent care review was published recently, they said by the end of this year there'd be something like 100,000 people in care. We're looking at 200,000. And
Really?
and then you start thinking about, well, where are you going to place these people? And then you get a thing called pop-up care, which a lot of people think it's easy just to buy a house, register it as a house of care, go through all the fire safety checks, etc., then get referrals, and that's it. And surprisingly, across the country, there's a lot of places like that where people use it to get rich quick. And that's not, if you want to be a provider, if you want to get into this professionally and have some longevity, you've got to have those essentials, those skills involved in that as well. And I think that's where, we've got to kind of eradicate that stigma as well. But semi-independent care is not all negative. It's not all houses in hotspot areas where people get rich quick, because there's great people out there who do it because they're passionate about making a difference. So that's something again about the campaigning is making sure. But if you are going to do this, this is where Ofsted get involved now, especially 16 plus, is that Ofsted need to be checking and regulating, but these people have got trained staff in these properties. But not just, you've got a fire door, that's amazing. You've got a certificate, that's amazing. It doesn't mean anything. We've got to make sure, but when these young people come here, and if local authorities are paying extortionate amounts of money, they're getting their money's worth. But that young person is the priority, not your bank account.
Mm. Absolutely. There's money to be made in running services well,
Yeah,
and they should be profitable businesses, shouldn't they?
yeah.
But absolutely, but it should be, that balance should be right, and the focus should be on the delivery of
Yeah,
service.
and I'll just say quickly, Lisa, for your listeners, is that I have no qualms with people doing this as a profitable business as long as they put back in the business.
Mm,
It's not rocket science. We talk about longevity. If you want to be the best provider, you want to work with local authorities for many, many years, then be the best provider.
mm, and do it really well and
Do
get
it really well, yeah. And make a lot of money, but and do it, where you can go to bed in the nighttime knowing but you've changed someone's life.
Yeah, yeah, and not to the lowest standard. So
Yeah.
why are local authorities still putting young people into those services? Why are they still being put into these services which really do not meet needs or standards?
Because there's a lot of old school mentality, and I said that cautiously. I was in Northamptonshire recently, and there's a company called Orchard House, and they do some great work, and they've got remarkable properties, amazing staff. And there was one person who was a member of the council, and she said, I'll quote what she said. She said, "We don't want them to get used to luxury. We do not want them to get used to of luxury." So she preferred to place someone in a bed sit at the same price, where that person then will, I don't know, fall into depression, have all kinds of mental health issues, because saying, well, but they'll never want to leave there. This is what they'll expect as normal. But the flip side to that is, but that'll motivate you to get a job. It'll motivate you to live like this forever. So there's a lot of that going on, but also,
That's horrific, isn't it?
it's
That's, yeah.
horrific. It's
Yeah.
horrible. It's horrible. And
We're
then,
talking about young people. We're
yeah, but
talking about people,
real
we're
lives.
talking about people who've had the most disturbed childhoods, who need
Exactly.
support they can
Yeah.
get to
Yeah.
move on. And yeah.
And so there's a lot of that, but also at the same time is that there's been a lot of bad press around support accommodation where, you've got providers who are, coming in at 20, 30 grand a week for a child who's really complex. So sometimes local authorities are thinking, well, we need to try and save money. I'm not going to send them to a decent provider, because, you can't tarnish all providers, because of that one bad incident. So I think there's a lot of that going on as well.
Mm,
And that's the biggest part of my work as well, going around the country and trying to build those bridges, kind of build those relationships with local authorities, good providers, and saying, come and visit the team. Don't just pick up the phone and have a conversation. Actually, come and visit the team. Bring your placement officers, bring local council leaders, and come and see what you provide. Come and talk to young people and see what programs they're on, because of, it's not just what the money pays for, but look at the outcomes. Look at what these young people go on to achieve because they've got the right support. And it goes back, we waste so much money on so many negative things. And then, Terry Galloway did this amazing slide when he was lobbying Parliament, and it showed you two pathways. It showed you one pathway when you do it wrong, and it showed you one pathway when you do it right. The wrong pathway would cost taxpayers millions and millions. The right pathway, you're saving millions and millions. And that's the kind of language you've got to use when you're talking to local authorities and providers, saying, this is the right pathway. This is a good placement. When this person leaves this placement, they will get a job or go into education, and then one day they'll pay their taxes and contribute to the economy, which will strengthen the economy. Or if we go around the wrong pathway, they might end up being made homeless 3 times. It then becomes the taxpayer's problem. They might end up in jail. It then becomes the taxpayer's problem. And you can see how these prices are just keep adding and adding and adding. So when I'm traveling the country and I come across a really good provider who's got all the essentials, all the credentials, I think, well, local authorities should send everybody here because they will not fail. It's like you want your kid to go to a good school in your catchment area. Why wouldn't you want a young person to go to a good provider in that catchment area? It doesn't make sense to me. It infuriates me, but they still think they can save money by sending them to a bedsit.
Yeah. And you can't just dump a 16, 17-year-old in a bedsit by themselves. That just doesn't
because
work.
the inevitability is that they will end up, just having a disastrous life, and it will cost local authorities so much more money in the long term.
So what does good look like, Chris? What would you say what would a good service look like if we were talking about
A
this?
good service is somebody who's passionate about doing this, somebody who wants to make sure that the house is clean. Somebody, there's somebody there to talk to. It's not just somebody who's going to come to the house twice a week for 1 hour and not have any engagement with that young person. Somebody who's going to sit down and say, look, I'm here to support you. I'm on the phone. There's not damp in the house. There's not a broken toilet, which you've been asking to get fixed for the last 6 months and nobody's listening to you. It's these little things. If you're going to be a provider and you're going to be the best provider, think about you're doing this for your own children. How would you want your own children to live in one of your properties? And I think that is such an essential, such an important part of that kind of process and that business is think about who's coming to live in your house, who's coming to live in your properties. What do you want them to say about you when they leave? Because you can't avoid that now with social media. It only takes a young person, 16-year-old, saying, I've been placed in this property. I'll take some pictures. I'll post it on social media and send it to Chris Wilde, because they do that. They do that already.
I'm glad. Yeah.
They send me pictures and I think, thank you. I'm going to contact this provider. I'm going to contact that local authority. I'm going to send them these pictures and say, really? You're sending a vulnerable 16-year-old to live in this property? And I know there's a lot of good properties in that area. So that's what good is. Good is, define good: security, stability, warmth, cleanliness, and just having somebody there who genuinely cares about you. That makes so much more difference.
And having that support to help you learn the skills you need at this stage so that you can transition through.
Exactly. Imagine that, being in a house where nobody talks to you. I've been there where there's a staff member sat in the office and you knock on the door and say, hey, I've got these forms to fill out. Not my problem. Go to the library. And imagine, but then I've seen the differences where a staff member on her day off has come into a property, into an organization, sat there for 8 hours going through forms of a young person who's applying for college or university. That's the difference. I've gone into houses where, I'd want to live. It's like I've gone into probably like, do you know what? I wish this was available when I was 16 and living care. Because again, this is the argument you have with local authorities saying you can never get, too much goodness is not a bad thing. It's like, there's not a paradox there. It's like, you're not going to just think, well, this is what I'll expect. I don't have to work hard to achieve good things. No, if you're given the right start in life, then you'll continue on that trajectory. If you're given a bad start in life, the majority of people who are used to deprivation and stuff like that and just living in grime, you'll gravitate towards that. And that's a scientific thing. Most people want the good life, not the bad life.
Yeah, but if you've not seen what the good life could be like, and
Yeah,
you've not been
exactly,
treated with
exactly.
respect, and you
Yeah,
don't expect anyone to treat you like that, do
I,
you? And
yeah. I
that's heartbreaking.
I've been in. I was in this placement company called Forge Care, and I seen a young person break down crying when she saw a bedroom. She said, This is a palace." It wasn't a palace, but to her it was. She said, "Oh my God, it's got pictures. It's got a lot of thought went into that bedroom."
Mm.
And it was just very basic, but for her, it was like a palace. And she broke down crying. And I thought, yeah, define what care is, what good care is. That's good care, Lisa. Just
Mm.
thinking ahead of, what to expect when these people come in, because you know where they've come from. They've come from trauma. They come from only things what most people in this world can describe as a nightmare. So just having these little trivial things, a picture on the wall, a clean carpet, a bed, if there's a damp patch, fix the damp patch. It's not rocket science, Lisa.
No, and it's what everybody should expect in a home, isn't it? Regardless of your support need,
Yeah,
regardless of your background, everyone should have a clean, safe home. That's
absolutely. And then when that person becomes successful later on in life, whatever success is, you can take credit for that. That's the gratification. You did your job right.
mm, having that real impact right from the
Yeah.
beginning is huge, isn't it? You were also talking about what you're doing with the National Care Leavers project before we came on, Chris. Tell us a little bit about that and what that
The,
is.
the National Care Leavers Projects. Yeah. So yeah, the National Care Leavers Project it's not everyone keeps texting me saying, "What is this? Is this something I can get involved with?" But yeah, you can actually. You can get involved and it's kind of just pledging your alliance to do more for young people leaving care. And that's just bringing everyone together to form some kind of unity. The idea around that is I work with numerous different companies around the country, and once every month having a bit of a webinar, just sharing experiences, talking about problems, helping each other, and spreading that out nationally, because I think communication is key here, and it's something I've never seen. Like when we get on call online and we've got companies in Portsmouth, companies in Hull, companies in Leeds on that call, all who run numerous properties around the country, but just sharing experiences and thinking of ways of, oh, you're doing this. That's a great idea. Maybe we can do that there. And that's what the National Care Leavers Project's about. It's bringing everyone together. We want to create more opportunities in education and employment. And again, these webinars are not just for people who are involved in the care system. A bit like your events, Lisa. We want to bring people who work in partnerships from outside the sector as well, because they play a big part in this. If you're a company who's maybe you might be able to give me two vacancies for young people coming from a shared accommodation within your area, within your vicinity. So that's collaboration, that's working together. That's what the project's about. We want to unite everybody, break those barriers, get rid of that stigma, and start to rebuild the system. And we don't want it to be dark and melancholic. We want it to be successful and light. When we think about academies and education and we think about people, striving for excellence, that's what we want from this.
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it sounds really good. What other things do we need to be thinking about? We've got property investors listening, we've got
Yeah.
investors listening, we've got local authority staff. What other things do you want to say to people, Chris,
I
while we've
think I
got you
think
on?
also if you get into this line of work is educate yourself. Educate yourself. If you don't come from that sector, you've got no care experience. That's not a big problem. It's not a big problem at all. Put yourself on a course, do a college course. I've spoken to some people who have been to your events and they've told me, but since they've spoken to me or listened to me speak, they've gone away to read more books and to do more research, because that makes you a better provider, doesn't it? If you've got that knowledge of wealth and experience. Uh, and I say to a lot of people, it doesn't matter if you haven't been in care, because being in care doesn't make you brilliant or an expert. Being empathetic and being open-minded makes you an expert. If I'm not a businessman and I could never, go and buy six houses and make them more successful, because that's not my remit. My remit is to go into them properties and support people to make sure, but they're done properly. But these people are doing it for the right reasons. And again, we need a collaboration, a variety of all different professionals and experience when we're doing things like this. Again, just when you've got a property as well, it's like, you're thinking, oh, I saw a guy who run a property and he was paying a fortune getting these plumbers out and stuff. And I says, why don't you get this young person on a course to be a plumber, then he can do all the plumbing work. So you kill two birds with one stone, but that's just thinking outside the box, isn't it, as well? You know, I've seen, and it's great to see young people who then come back and work for organizations like, you know, oh, I looked after him for 3 years. I've come back and given him a job. So I think if you're going to do it, think about the reasons you do it, be passionate about it, get yourself some training, get some knowledge, be open-minded, and you know, and invest in this properly, and you'll reap the rewards. That's inevitable.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. I'll put the links to your books in the show notes
Brilliant.
so people can find them. And thank you for your time. Take care.
Thank you so much as always.